trying to find voices and people that maybe are not as represented in the food industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes back to the authenticity. What is interesting about BFG is more than 50% of our entrepreneurs are women, and we've been, for us, it just comes down to great people, whether they're male, female, or anything else. It's not like it's an overt kind of strategy of ours. That said, if you find someone who's passionate and authentic, that's someone we want to talk to.
Yeah, I think you kind of led into what I was going to ask about, how her background wasn't really in the food industry she came from.
Yeah.
Here in communications, did that make you nervous or more excited that she was kind of bringing some fresh energy?
Yeah, look, I think she, and she always says, she knows when to ask for help. She certainly has a skill set that we don't have, or at least, I definitely didn't have. But yet we were able to bring some experiences and kind of maybe back of house type stuff to the partnership that was really beneficial for her. She already had a great business when she partnered with us, and we just helped her really accelerate that.
So we also just saw a presentation on Walmart in the frozen and chilled food space. So what do you kind of think about that space right now and how much it's changing?
Well, I would just give a shout out to Walmart because I think they're doing a fabulous job. I've now been in the food and beverage industry for over 10 years, and how far they've come so quickly has been really amazing. Even in the last 5 years at BFG, our brand strategies with Walmart in terms of having them as a launch partner has really evolved. I think they nailed it in their presentation when they said 90% of U.S. consumers shop there.
Yeah.
So if you're not selling there, then you're probably not trying to build a really big business, at least not yet today. So some of our brands are using them for launch partners, and they've really come a long way. Now, out of the roughly 4,000 stores in the U.S., maybe they'll go into 500 initially or 1,000 initially. Some are now launching into 2,000 stores, but they've just done a great job kind of meeting the needs of the evolving consumer, and they've merchandised it in a way where they have better for you products kind of in their own sets and things, and it's really working.
So what do you think about how the frozen food space has evolved as far as the quality of products and what we're seeing now?
Yeah, I mean, at CAULIPOWER we always say fresh is the new frozen,
Right.
Frozen is the new fresh, and I think even Wall Street's starting to pick up on that quite a bit. If you think about kind of the product integrity of flash freezing something shortly after it's been picked relative to the freshness of produce that it's maybe 6 weeks old, then the nutrient density is often greater in the frozen products. So we think people are just kind of slowly waking up to that, and obviously having such a great experience with CAULIPOWER certainly opened their eyes a bit to what that channel can become. I think people are finally going down those aisles again, and
Right.
the frozen foods of today are very different from yesteryear.
And we also just saw a presentation on Pepsi Venture Group and what they're investing in. How do you kind of determine when investing what's a passing trend and what's something that actually has staying power?
Yeah, I wish we had a crystal ball.
Right.
I think, we try to kind of focus more on what are the underlying kind of characteristics of a trend. So rather than say, whatever the buzzword is of the day, whether it's paleo or keto or whatever it may be, what is the consumer trying to tell us? And, ultimately that kind of leads to better for you, or maybe less sugar, or things like healthy fats. We try to kind of follow some thought leaders in this space, but we're probably not always going to get it right.
Yeah, right, correct. So just to finish off, what are your thoughts on the presentations that we've had so far? What are your kind of takeaways, things you've learning, things that have excited you?
Yeah, I think just generally the energy here is just awesome. So it's just so wonderful to be here, and to be here supporting a portfolio of companies even better. I thought Walter Robb and just talking about the evolving landscape and kind of trying to think about things from the retailer's perspective was really good. I think, so much it's brand, but if you think about kind of not only, and even the Walmart presentation today as well, not only kind of solving the needs of the retailer, but also their end customers, and kind of coming to something that is a win-win-win is the right way to really build a big business fast. But no, it's just such a community, and the energy level, as you can hear, is really high. And
yes.
So it's great to be here. So thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for stopping by. It was really great chatting with you, and enjoy the rest of your NOSH Live.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Yes. All right. So coming up next, we have Cole Orovitz. He's the COO, CFO, and co-founder of Alpha Foods. Hi, how are you?
Great, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
How are you enjoying NOSH Live so far?
So far, so good. This is my first time at NOSH, so I'm really excited to be here
Well,
and
welcome.
see what all the buzz is about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to start out, can you tell us just a little bit about Alpha Foods, the kind of food you guys offer, what your kind of mission is?
Sure. So Alpha Foods was started in 2015 by myself and my co-founder partner, Lauren Wallace. He's the founder of Good Karma Foods, a 30-year vegan. I'm kind of a lifelong, I guess, meat eater, and have been reducing my meat consumption for many years. So when we met in 2014, 2015, we wanted to create a company and a brand that could appeal to those who wanted to reduce their meat consumption and just introduce more plant-based options into their daily lives. So that's how we started, and here we are a few years later. We've got distribution kind of across the nation and rolling out a suite of great, delicious plant-based products that are really easy to eat and delicious.
Mm-hmm. So was it easy for you to kind of make the transition from being like an avid meat eater to having more of a plant-based diet?
I think so. It was really clear for me when I tried one of our first prototypes that I didn't have to sacrifice any taste or texture expectations, and it was just a good product. And so that really started the ball rolling on kind of what drove our product creation behind capturing the hearts and minds and stomachs, I guess, of people that didn't know what they didn't know about plant-based options, and were wanting to kind of dabble their toes into the world of meat reduction, and I guess trying something different for their diets.
Mm-hmm. And how difficult was it? What was like the process of developing those products and figuring out what you guys wanted to have as your main products?
Well, we were looking at products that were widely available and widely consumed by the general population, and wanted to make the best tasting plant-based version of those. So our first line of products were a line of handheld burritos, and they were very mainstream in their kind of culinary development, and from there we just moved on to kind of the next ring of products. So we've got pizzas and pot pies and tamales, and the burritos again were the first ones. So these were products that were people were eating as maybe children or earlier in their lives, and they had just a kind of an authentic connection and a relatability factor for those people as they transition from meat-based products to the kind of the plant-based alternative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we just saw a presentation on Walmart and frozen food space there. Can you kind of walk us through your experience with Walmart and getting your product in stores there?
Yeah, so Walmart was actually our first customer, and they've been just fantastic to work with. We launched our line of burritos in 2017, late 2017, and we've continually expanded our footprint kind of across the nation from west to east. They have also picked up our pot pies last year, and we'll be soon launching our personal Alpha pizzas coming up here in the fall. So we've had just a great experience with Walmart, and the product has done really well on the shelves, and we get a lot of fanfare from consumers that are shopping at Walmart.
Mm-hmm. Can you walk us kind of through how you guys decided to start with a big retailer? Because I think that a lot of brands probably think they need to start small and kind of work their way up to the bigger players. So can you kind of walk us through why you guys decided to start big?
Yeah, of course. Well, we wanted to have the biggest impact in this space, and I think that is the traditional route that people are coached on taking, and start small and then expand into more mass market. And we took that and kind of flipped it on its head and thought, well, what is the biggest impact that we can have for introducing plant-based products into the market? And we went at the biggest company in the world, and it was a success. So we're really happy to have worked with Walmart, and our next two customers were Kroger and Publix. So we've really tried to capture kind of the widest swath of distribution and retailers as we could, just to bring these products to market where there is a lot more, mass market adoption now than probably a few years ago.
Was there ever a consideration of starting small, or did you guys kind of know at this company that you always wanted to kind of take big swings?
It was a bit of a leap of faith, of course. Nothing's for sure in life, but we knew that we were creating a brand that we hoped had mass market appeal, and also products that had mass market appeal, and that the most number of people could relate to. So that's why we've kind of created a wide array of plant-based products that have relatability for the most number of people. So that's why we thought that the mass market approach first would be the most impactful, and now we're starting to kind of backfill into the natural channels, and finally we've got Whole Foods coming on board in July, which we're really excited about. We've been working on them for a couple of years, and they'll be launching our burritos in July.
So you guys closed a funding round in March. Can you talk a little bit about what those funds are going towards?
Sure. Yeah, we last time we spoke with Project NOSH, we were just finishing the fundraise, and it's going to go a long ways to continue our hiring plans, our general marketing, and also just support the product launches that we have coming up for Q3, Q4 this year.
So do you have anything in the pipeline as far as marketing that you can talk about, or any kind of plans?
I guess as far as product launches go, we've got the Alpha Pizzas launching across the Ahold banners this month, actually. And we've got actually an exciting line of core protein, center plate protein products launching at Sprouts, actually, in July and August. So that is a little bit of a departure from our handheld grab-and-go products, but we're excited to be kind of center plate protein and provide these products for consumers who become familiar with the brand to now start using these as ingredients in their other creations. And those will be at Sprouts in July, August, and then we've also got some more distribution coming on with Albertson Safeway in September.
And then I guess the last question is kind of what, I know that you told NOSH in March that you guys kind of like to look for the white space when looking for new products to launch. What is your kind of criteria for figuring out just exactly what you guys want to do next?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you can please
good question.
Program will begin in 5 minutes.
Sorry. We do canvass a lot of feedback from our consumers, actually, and we get requests all the time rolling into Instagram or our website or Facebook for things. Can you do this? Can you do that? We've had a lot of interest in a breakfast program, so that's something that we have under the hood that's being created as we speak. And we're looking at some of the broader trends in the marketplace, and generally the way things are going is center plate protein. So we have every species, chicken, fish, pork, and beef, kind of under development, and that the form factor and how it ends up being consumed and on people's and consumers' plates is something that we generally look to both retail partners and consumers for feedback on, and we've found that some of the retailers are great for feedback on what we may think is a great idea, and they can push us in the direction that they know will work for their consumers.
Well, Cole, thank you so much for joining us. It was great to hear all about Alpha Foods, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys have next.
All right. Thank you.
So up next on the main stage is Jane Miller, the CEO of Lily Sweets.
This industry is so popular, it's launching thousands of new products every year. How many of these can really be on shelf?
The size of the brick and mortar world relative to natural and organic, which is this year going to top about 133 billion.
We were doing, over $130 million in sales with 24 people.
Disrupt and be disrupted. There's somebody behind you always.
The naturally mainstream customer, and they make up about 2/3 of our natural foods shoppers. And they buy a mix of conventional products and natural products.
We are starting to see a shift in the consumers' demand for products with an absence of negatives to products with a presence of positives.
Consumers are always at the heart of what we do.
So if we can't really solve a problem for the consumer, we feel like we shouldn't be jumping into that space.
The community is what's driving our innovation, our flywheels.
We're trying to be that modern day convenience store and be that new 7-Eleven.
Big food knows they have to change.
I think the strategics are looking for businesses that have soul, and the soul starts with why you start it.
You know your consumer base best, and you know what you want to project out into the world and own it. Love it, embrace it, celebrate whatever it is your product is. This industry is so popular, it's launching thousands of new products every year. How many of these can really be on shelf?
The size of the brick and mortar world relative to natural and organic, which is this year going to top about 133 billion.
We were doing, over $130 million in sales with 24 people.
Disrupt and be disrupted. There's somebody behind you always.
The naturally mainstream customer, and they make up about 2/3 of our natural foods shoppers.
I bought a new pair of shoes because I got so anxious about changing my sneakers, and then I was the only kid who cried on the last day of school because I was already worried about the next year of school. Now that I'm older, I've gotten a little better. In fact, my closet might indicate I'm a little too good at picking out shoes. But the fact remains that as humans, it's often more comfortable to remain in the same place than face change. So what happens when you as a leader have to not only deal with change yourself, but also convince a group of people to follow you along and join you? Jane Miller is an expert at leading individuals through periods of such uncertainty. A veteran of large CPG companies, she's since shepherded several emerging brands through redesigns, repositionings, and new leadership. Currently, she's spearheading the relaunch of VMG portfolio company Lily's under a new brand aesthetic and into new categories. So here to share how she does it, please welcome Jane.
I'm so excited to be here. The last 2 days has been amazing to listen to all the speakers and talk a lot about why change. And what Carol and Jeff have asked me to talk about is how do you actually change? So we know the why, we know how fast our industry is changing, but what are some tools that you can take away on how you can lead change? The first place I'd like to start, though, is my first experience with change to kind of set the stage about what I learned about it and how it's really influenced me. So my first experience with change happened early in my career. So I started my career at Frito-Lay, which is a division of PepsiCo. And Frito-Lay was based in Dallas. And at the time, it was a pretty informal place to work. And so someone with my style, which today is pretty much what it was like about 30 years ago, was very informal, kind of gregarious, maybe come off a number of times as a little bit unprofessional. But it worked really well at Frito. So at Frito, I'd been really pretty successful, had transferred up to Pepsi because my husband was going to be running a business up in the New York area. And I showed up at Pepsi, and something really weird happened, was that it wasn't this informal, gregarious sort of place. It was very serious, because back in the day, soft drinks were super serious business. And so everybody was like not so much like looking very forward to Jane Miller coming in, and I couldn't understand where I'd gone from kind of a rising star at Frito to sort of being this person that looked like nobody ever heard me. Like I would talk and nobody ever listened. And I couldn't really understand what had happened. So one day, the senior vice president of my division invited me into his office, and of course, being this aspiring young professional, I assumed immediately that I was going to get promoted. So as I walked in his office and I sat down, I did kind of what I typically did, and I was like, hey, John, I had a great weekend. I walked Target and Pumpkin, and like, what was your weekend like? Meanwhile, on the other side of the desk, there was this man in a suit, which we all wore back in the day, who was very serious. And basically, at the time, I thought he was like older than God, but I think he's about 10 years younger than I am today. But it was really, really scary. But I'm sitting there and I'm waiting to hear what he has to say. And he starts out and he says, Jane, we think you have a lot of potential. Sit up in my seat a little bit more, because this is what I was waiting right before the big promotion. And he says, we think you have a lot of potential, but the issue is that we have a problem. Thinking, problem. So potential, but problem. How do these two things go together? And he goes, here's the problem. Your problem is that your style is getting in the way of you being successful. Your style is really, you're not going to really be able to make it here at Pepsi unless you change your style. You know, and I had been very comfortable with my style and been pretty successful, and so I really didn't understand why I needed to change my style. But he went on and said, you have potential, we have this problem. What we're going to do is we're going to send you 3 days one-to-one with a psychologist to help you work on this problem. So imagine if you're sitting across from someone who's just told you that you're going to spend 3 days one-to-one with a psychologist to fix a problem that you didn't know that you had. It's kind of a little bit alarming. So I'm sitting there, like, the first thing I thought about was, well, let me not start crying. The second thing was I was thinking really nasty things about him and his mother. But then I thought, okay, let me go home and talk to my husband about this, because maybe he's going to have a little bit clearer head. So I went home and I said, Michael, I had this meeting today, and they want to send me 3 days one-to-one with a psychologist to work on my style. And being the good husband that he was like, bastards. But you should really go. I don't know if that was an indication of what he thought about my style, but he said, no, seriously, like, it's expensive to spend 3 days with a psychologist. So you really should go spend 3 days with a psychologist, because it's gonna, it'll maybe help you in some way, and you'll learn a little bit more about yourself. So I went for 3 days one-to-one with Marty Seldman, PhD, in a nondescript hotel room in Florida. And pretty much cried the whole time, because I felt like they were trying to change me from me to being them, and I still really liked me a lot. But what I learned out of that experience was sort of how I'll start as we talk about change today, which is change sucks. Like, nobody really wants to change. And in my particular case, this was the best advice I'd actually ever gotten in my career. Because for those of you that have worked for big companies before, the situation is, if nobody tells you you've got a problem, you're going to just keep doing the same thing, and you're going to get off track. And that's not just big companies, it's kind of in any experience. And so by someone actually telling me that I had an issue with them, then I could make the decision whether I wanted to change or not, and it was really in my control. So what have I learned since that experience many years ago? The first thing is that change is inevitable. I tried to pull a quote about change, and this guy is from BC sometime, which is basically a couple thousand years ago. And so change is not a new topic just coming up at NOSH Live this week. It's something that is inevitable we all have to deal with. Now, in my 35 years in business world, what I've also learned is people generally hate change. It's like my experience back in the early days of my career. It's just hard. You get comfortable. You like what you're doing. Like, why do you have to do something different? And so the third thing that I've really learned is that because it's inevitable, because people hate change, all change is hard. And what I'd like to do is take a couple of minutes to just tell you a little bit about my background with change and then give you some of the tips that I mentioned before. So here's my experience of change. So I've had really hard and negative change. I was a part of a team that got Hostess out of bankruptcy, and what we were involved with doing was a fairly large reduction in force. Now, it was a really difficult time, and if any of you had to lay people off and try to explain to their families and what's happening with their futures and their pensions and everything, it is hard and it's really, really negative. The good news that came out of it was that Twinkies was saved for the world, so I'm sure many of you are really happy about that. The bulk of my career was actually spent at Frito-Lay and at Pepsi, as I mentioned before. And that change was really one that happens in a lot of large companies, where you're continually changing because you're trying to improve your margins. You're trying to bring out innovation. You're trying to make sure that you're sort of beating the competition that much more, but you have to continually be changing. And it's really actually hard on an organization, especially I would say back in the day when I worked at Frito-Lay, that it was a very, very successful company, but there was always this desire to be changing, and there was always reorganizations and always things that would sort of shake things up. And I think it became a little bit a matter of course. So it was just hard to always go through that and to really try to understand it. I will say, though, if you don't remember anything else about my speech today, I was part of the team that brought chili cheese Fritos into the world. So anybody like chili cheese Fritos? You are welcome. So anyway, now, today I am running a company called Lily Sweets, and some of you may know it's a chocolate company, both chocolate bars, also baking chips for cookies, et cetera. Other recipes, we're introducing new peanut butter cups and chocolate-covered nuts. It's a very, very fast-growing company, and I'm really, really blessed because it's actually, of my long career, it's the best job I've ever had. I mean, I'm seriously in absolutely the sweet spot of a great product line, an amazing founder in Cynthia Tice. We have a great investor in VMG, and I have the best team of my career, which I'll talk about in a second. But it's really, really hard to grow fast, and I think many of you are probably experiencing that, which is trying to understand why you have to change so quickly, what does that mean in terms of people, and how you start to make the transition as you continue to grow. So what I'd like to talk about are my 5 tips. So in addition to being the CEO of Lily's, I am the founder of a career advice website called JaneKnows.com. And I came up with this about 5 or 6 years ago, with the idea being that even though technology has changed and jobs have changed, what hasn't changed over time is how we deal with one another. And the same kind of issues that I dealt with when I started my career, young people that are starting today have the same issues. You've got horrible bosses. You've got catty situations. You've got reasons that you got passed up for a promotion. And so Jane Knows was sort of a safe place to go to get really honest advice. And I talk a lot about all the mistakes I made in my career, so other people don't have to make those mistakes. You can make your own, but you don't have to make all the bad ones that I did. And so I have a series on Jane Knows called 5 Tips About Career Stuff, and one of them that we'll talk about today is leading and embracing change. So the first tip, surround yourself with good people. Don't go it alone. And first, let me just sort of say, spoiler alert, these are really, really simple tips, and I hope they're not going to be offensive to anybody, but I have actually found in my career that sometimes when you get to the least common denominator, you're going to have the most success. So surround yourself with good people. Don't go it alone. Now, I have this really great matrix here that I would have to say I know I stole from someone a really long time ago, but I'm just going to claim it as my own for today and say that plagiarism is the greatest form of flattery. But the way this thing works is on that would be the vertical axis is will, and this is about attitude. So on the bottom, it's low. On the top, it's high. So, you know, that sort of makes a lot of sense. So this is attitude about how somebody comes to a job. Skill is like, what's their proficiency, their technical skill? So are they new in the job, so that would maybe be low, new in their career would be low, or are they like a highly proficient person who's been around for a long time? So when I start to think about a team and surrounding myself with good people to be able to enable change, the first thing I want to do is go to this matrix. So let me start with the upper right-hand corner. This is where we all aspire to be, and probably everybody in this room is here, and this is the kind of teams that we want, right? We want people that have great attitudes, they're so happy to be a part of the plan, and they've got unbelievable skills that you don't have to train them. They just come on the job, and they're great. I am totally blessed with Lily Sweets, and that I have the best team that fits into this quadrant. If you have a chance to meet over the course of the rest of the day, two of my direct reports, Seth Manette, who's our SVP of Sales, and Sarah Mice, who's our SVP of Marketing. These two exemplify what it's like to be highly skilled with a really positive attitude, and that's really awesome, and we all want to kind of work towards that. However, sometimes we get people in the other quadrant, which is they have really low skills and really bad attitudes. Okay, now I would just tell you right now, yeah, just get rid of them, okay? I mean, this is like, you cannot have no skills and bad attitudes and make it in a company, especially the kind of companies we have here. We're working way too hard, trying to do too many jobs, and these people just have to go. So that's kind of straightforward, right? You got the Sarah and the Seth up in the corner that's yay, you got the guys that need to get going in the bottom. So what about everybody else? So this is where it gets really, really tricky. Our job as leaders to make change less hard is to really get the people that support us and work for us to move from these other two quadrants. So let me start in the top left-hand one, which is, this is somebody with a great attitude, but not very high skills. What I would say is nurture that person, get them in the right programming, get them great mentors, really, really help these people, because if you've got great attitudes and you have low technical skills, you can train skills, you can't train will. And so if you actually really get anybody in that quadrant, really embrace them and really take it on as your personal responsibility to try to get to move them to the right-hand quadrant. Now here's the problem. Many of us who have inherited different organizations in our career, you're going to actually maybe get somebody who's in the bottom right-hand corner. And so this person has got unbelievably strong technical skills. Maybe they're great with the customer. Maybe they're really good at purchasing. Maybe they're fabulous in finance. But they have a bad attitude. And it brings everybody else in the organization down. But you make excuses for them. You're like, hey, these guys are so good. Nobody can take the place of this technical expertise that this person has. Nobody is like this person. So even though they kind of like piss everybody off and like they really can't manage anybody and they're not that good to be around, we cannot lose that person. You can lose that person. This is a seriously important thing to know about running organizations and trying to manage change. Is as invaluable as we think any of us are, if you got a bad attitude and you can't change it, you can't be part of the plan. It just doesn't work for high-performance organizations. So my first tip for you in terms of really managing change is make sure you surround yourself with really good people. The next ones, I'll just kind of go through each one of them, and then Carol and I'll have a chance for some question and answers. But communication is job one. You can't over-communicate. And I know that everybody kind of says this, but let me give my example at Lily's. What we've done a really good job of is saying, oh, we just got this new account, and oh my gosh, we just had 135,000 Instagram followers, and hey, we just had this happen, and hey, we just had this happen. Lots of real positives. And so I felt as a leader, we were doing a pretty good job of communicating what was going on in the organization. So I had an opportunity to do a little bit of a town hall about a month or so ago, and we're doing, here's the Instagram, and here's the new customers, and here's this and that. And one guy in finance who kind of raised his hand sort of meekly, and he's like, I have a question I'd like to ask. I go, yeah, great. Like, is it about the new Walmart distribution we got, or is it like what we're doing on Pinterest? He goes, why do we have to introduce so many new products? I mean, like, we're already growing so much. Why are we doing this? Because from his perspective, we had gone from 2 co-manufacturers to 8. We'd gone from about 12 products to close to 20. And in his job and in his world, he didn't see that as more growth stuff. He just saw it as like more system stuff and really, really didn't understand why we were doing that. And what I really realized at that time, and this wasn't the only time, but many times throughout my career, is when you're the CEO or you're the leader, you have the view of everything that's going on. But when you're in any one of those particular jobs, you just have one small piece of it. And so if you really want to help people get through change, make sure that you're communicating on a regular basis. Make sure that people understand the why of what you're doing, not just what you're doing. And I really kind of left that out. I wasn't saying why we were going after new customers or why we were going, I mean, it seems kind of obvious in some ways, but not really when you're the person behind the scenes kind of handling all the transactions. So you really can't communicate too much. The third one is this is having real empathy for the people that are impacted by change. Now, probably if many of you were in the situation like I was at Hostess and you're laying people off, you go, well, I mean, that makes me sad. I'm empathetic about that. I know someone's not going to have a job, and they have a family support, so you feel really personally about that. But I would tell you, any kind of change has an impact on people that really can be very profound. At Lily's, again, coming back to our current situation, when we got started a little over a year ago, Cynthia had founded the company, had run it for about 6 years, and then I was brought on board and started to bring a team on board. She had built a business of scale with herself, her 2 kids, and an operations person. And very quickly, we started to bring on people to actually support the infrastructure for the growth that she had created, to sort of make sure that we had the foundation to keep the business going. And so we hired a couple of people early on that we thought were going to be perfect for the job that we thought we needed. And literally in 3 months, the jobs changed so much that the skills that we thought we needed we didn't need. Now, maybe many of you have run big growth organizations. For me, I've run a lot of turnarounds, a lot of fix-its, so I had never been on this trajectory where you're growing so fast that the skills change so quickly for the people that you're trying to manage. And so I would say just really trying to understand that it isn't always about laying off people, it's about putting people in jobs that maybe they weren't qualified to handle, and how do you help them be successful, but really feeling for where it comes from them, not just from you. My fourth tip is to be honest and transparent and to not sugarcoat things. My experience in this hit me really hard a number of years ago. I was the president of Heinz in London. And it was a relatively large business, and we had just acquired another company, and I had never been in the situation of acquiring a company. And so thinking, well, I want to, like everybody, feel good about Jane Miller, and they're coming on board, and so I had the whole, HP Foods was the company that we acquired, and we had everybody in a room, and I said, this is a merger, and this is going to be such a great opportunity for us to work together, and it's going to be an amazing future of the Heinz company and the HP Foods company together, and I really categorized it in a way that was almost like no one was going to be a synergy. No one was going to lose a job. It was all like the fluffy stuff that was associated with it. Well, the fact of the matter is, it wasn't a merger, it was an acquisition, and people were going to be losing their jobs. And not too long after I gave that speech, the guy who had ended up reporting to me that had run HP, he came in and he basically said, I don't know how to tell you this in any other way, except you're a liar. This is not what is happening here. Why didn't you just be honest with everybody and let them know what was happening? Because it's easier if you know what the truth is versus somebody telling you something that's not the truth. So be honest and transparent. I mean, obviously you can't always give all your secrets out when you have big change going on, but try to be as honest as you can, because you'll get caught in that, and it's worse from a credibility standpoint if you don't deal with it straight up. And then finally, taking care of yourself in the process. If any of you have been caregivers for family members that have been ill, you know what it's like to spend a lot of time with somebody and really try to help them through a process. And in that process, you're not thinking about yourself very much. What I'd say is change is the same way. I kind of think about it in some ways it's like a bucket. And everything's kind of getting pulled out of the bucket. It takes a lot of energy to be a great leader. It takes a lot of energy to be strong and to have people believe in you. And it's just like getting sucked out. And so what you have to do is you have to just keep putting stuff on the top, like stuff that you love to do. Like, what is it fills your cup? It could be a partner. It could be, something I'm into, rescuing horses. It could be, an athlete, whatever it is. But fill the cup, so that when it starts to get drained out from a leadership standpoint, you have resources to be able to depend on. So surround yourself with good people. Communication is job one. have empathy for people, be honest and transparent, and take care of yourselves in the process. And on a commercial note, as you're taking care of your process, make sure you eat less sugar because you're sweet enough already. So, Kara, thank you.
Let's have a seat. Thank you so much. I kind of want to ask questions about rescuing horses, but I think I'm supposed to talk about change. So, Jane, one thing that maybe you wouldn't say about yourself that I find amazing is that when you do go to a new company, there are some people you have worked with for a very long time that will trust you and want to work with you in your next endeavors. Do you think that because of the way you've approached change, they know that no matter what, they just trust you? Like, how have you gone about building that?
Well, I think it's a long time reputational thing, and I would say probably the thing that I learned early in my career was that you treat everybody exactly the same way. Whether it's the CEO or the janitor, that everybody gets treated the same way and that you have their backs. And I had a lot of experiences early in my career that was maybe a tougher time back in the corporate world, many years ago, but where you're kind of left out alone and you really didn't feel like that your leader was there for you. And so I think over a series of years, you just kind of build a bit of a track record. And it is really like, walk the talk, and reputations get around pretty quickly.
And you mentioned your early career years, so that experience with the psychologist. Sometimes there are things about ourselves that we need to change. How do you as a leader figure out when, or as an employee, when you do need to change and when maybe you're just not the right fit for that situation?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll use that example because maybe somebody might be wondering what actually happened after going for 3 days to the psychologist and how did that actually work. So what I learned was that my great flamboyant style was not working in this super corporate environment because everyone thought that I wasn't professional. So it wasn't enthusiastic, it was lack of professionalism. And so the first thing I did was I came back, and I had really long hair at the time, and I put it up in a bun, and I got glasses, which I didn't need at the time. And I show up to work like, okay, well, I'm going to just show them that I got the message on this. I am super professional now. And I literally walked in the office, and the 3 people that reported to me laughed so hard that it was not really working very well. But what happened for me was I did learn that I needed to moderate my style. That talking about my dogs and hiking on the weekend or rescue horses or whatever, nobody wanted to hear that. And if I got to the facts as quickly as possible, then I would have a lot more credibility. And so I didn't change who I was, but I changed how I interacted with people. And so I think, a long way to your question, I think it's trying to understand where you draw the line yourself. Like for me, I didn't mind adapting my style to be successful at Pepsi, but I didn't want to become a different person. And I think if you're kind of continually in that stage of feeling uncomfortable, like you don't fit, leave. Because I think that's the thing that we're so blessed about in this industry is there's so much need for talent, and it doesn't always work. Sometimes you're with a company that isn't the right fit, and I've had that happen a couple of times, and I don't blame it on the company, I don't blame it on me, it's just it doesn't always work. And I think being able to identify that yourself, maybe before someone else does, is a good technique.
You mentioned also communicating why you're doing what you're doing. There's only sometimes so much communicating you can do, so how do you go about simultaneously also building up trust so that at a certain point, yes, you will share the why when you can, but also your team just trusts that you're making the right choice?
Well, it isn't just the person at the top. It requires the Sarahs and the Seths and Lana and Phil, my other 2 senior staff members that carry this down. So they're not just looking for me to do that. And I think it is this consistent, we say what we're going to do and we do what we're going to do. And then you just, again, continue to build a track record. And, people just are not going to come in immediately and just sort of say, oh, whatever you say is right. I mean, you just have to keep proving yourself. And what I've seen, Seth and I've worked together in another circumstance, and it was really difficult. And what we learned working together was that the times like now, this with Lily's is easy in some ways because it's fun and exciting. It's when you really are challenged with growth and other issues that you need to spend more focus and more communication and more trust.
And you have been, speaking of involving other parties in the discussion, you have, or conversation, I should say, you have been at companies where, like John and Jeni's, you were a CEO brought in and the founder's still there. Lily's is, an example of that. Do you involve the founder in that process of change? What about maybe brands or people who are in that situation themselves? What's your advice on working with the founder?
It's an ongoing process. I mean, Cynthia is the most amazing, inspirational founder, and she went from running the company 24/7 to allowing me to run the company. So unlike Jeni and John, we don't have a co-CEO situation. It's like I'm really the one that's running it, and she's an advisor and works with customers and innovation and everything. And I think for us, it's continually talking about it, because the thing that she birthed is growing into something really amazing, and I think having her be a part of that change and understanding how it's changing. So we, similar to John and Jeni, we talk very frequently and are together quite frequently, kind of continually talking about how the business is evolving.
And on that idea of communications, what happens if the leader, you decide to change something, whether it's the packaging or launching a new SKU, you make the wrong choice? Do you course correct? How much do you need to explain? How do you deal with that type of change?
You're going to make mistakes. I mean, I would say that I probably have made more mistakes and had successes and probably learned more from the mistakes. And I think it's being vulnerable. And I think, was it Robert yesterday that said about being humble and having humility? I think that's part of it, is sometimes you're just not going to make the right, decision. And what I always say to my group is, we're making the best decision we can with the information that we've got. And if we make a bad decision, we know how we got there, because we didn't do it blindly, we didn't do it naively, we did it with the information that we have. And so then you have to course correct and do something different. And I think showing that kind of vulnerability and then allowing your organization to have that is really critical.
Well, thank you for sharing your vulnerability here with our audience and telling your story. We appreciate it so much.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. All right. If you head off that way.
Hi, I personally am feeling very vulnerable at this moment, mostly because apparently Jane accomplished in 3 days with a psychologist what I haven't been able to fix in 3 decades. So let's talk to the brokers. For so many brands, the core conduit to retailers isn't necessarily their distribution network or even their own sales force. It's that set of brokers who make chain calls, work as their brand emissaries, and try to get wins for their clients and for themselves. In many ways, the information you get from your broker is going to be your scouting report on your potential retailer relationships and a statement of your ongoing retail relationships. So what we've decided to do is pull together 3 very high-profile career brokers to help us understand developments in some of the most important retail channels out there, to help us fill in this picture that we started setting up with the co-ops and continued with Walmart. There's a lot of space in between. And we brought in these folks from channels from specialty and conventional supermarkets to convenience, Target, Walmart, and even Amazon. Between the 3 of them, we do indeed get representation of the omni-channel environment. And they're here to be sort of our correspondents regarding some of the key developments that growing brands need to understand at retailing. Joining us, we have Tracy Miedema, who's the Vice President of Innovation and Brand Development at Presence Marketing, Treg Brown, the Chief Sales Officer at Team Direct Management, and TJ Vareka, Principal at KMG Group. Hi.
Hey, good morning.
So what I want to do to start off, I hope everyone's having a great day, is have y'all talk a little bit about your companies and what the key developments are in the channels that they cover that you think are having the most impact on entrepreneurial brands. So we'll start with Tracy.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tracy Miedema. I work with Presence Marketing. We're the nation's largest broker of natural and organic products. And for 30 years now, those are the only kinds of products that we've represented in the marketplace. We started out just servicing the natural channel, but about 15 years ago, as consumers really flocked to the conventional channel to buy their natural and organic, our business evolved in that direction too. So we have about 500 employees. We canvass the entire US, and just really thrilled to be here with everybody today.
Would you say that the move into conventional of natural and organic products is what's the biggest impact right now?
I mean, that's a tide change that's happened over the last couple decades, and we certainly evolved our business model to service conventional. You know, even just 10 years ago, it was more like 25% of that commerce was flowing through conventional. Now it's about 65%. And those numbers are just going to keep evolving as consumers want to find the products that are tailored to their particular needs where they shop.
All right. Treg, tell us about what y'all do at Team Direct.
Okay, so Treg Brown with Team Direct Management. We have been on the ground for over 15 years in Northwest Arkansas. We actually work with Walmart and Sam's Club in every category currently, with a specializing in emerging brands and specialty foods represented here today. We are the largest boutique agency in Northwest Arkansas with over 55 people on the ground, and we just live and breathe Walmart and Sam's Club and the omni-channel with both Jet and San Bruno every day. I probably now, of the three of us, have the easiest job up here because you had Walmart come before me, and they kind of demoed like the three things that we really have seen as a major difference at Walmart over the last 2 to 3 years.
All right. Can you give us a status report of how well it's working in there?
You know what? It's working exceptionally well. If you think about where Walmart was about 3 or 4 years ago, I think people were afraid to come to them, and emerging brands thought of Walmart as the last place you would want to come, and some of the myths that Sarah and Laura showed up there were actually true. And so you saw from the team today that Walmart is much more open to working with emerging brands and realize that it's different than working with the large CPG. So they have been great partners. We've actually partnered with them and hosted a couple of emerging brand summits in Northwest Arkansas that has really been able to break that myth and allowed emerging brands to understand that Walmart is just people. They're good people, and they're mission-based just like the brands are. So we've been able to break down a lot of the barriers, which we think has helped accelerate the adoption of the emerging brands in the Walmart space. And Walmart is doing nice things in terms of having reduced criteria for the brands. They're not holding us to the same standards that they might have a large CPG. They are much more patient. They're very transparent. They will allow you to go in a smaller set of stores. And as long as you're very transparent up front of where you think you need to be, how many doors, where you think you can be the most successful, they are a wonderful partner and very accommodating.
All right. TJ.
Good morning. First of all, honored to be on stage with Tracy and Treg. You mentioned, I think, industry icons. These two are obviously have had great careers and really charted some of the kind of the brokerage best practices. I'm at KMG Group. We have offices in Minneapolis and Bentonville. And really, you know, our thesis is that no longer does the mass channel have to be the last piece of the puzzle. I was talking with Mary before coming up here, and you're seeing brands like Skinny Dip launch chain-wide at Target, brands like Clio launch chain-wide at Walmart, and be very successful. And the formula used to be, get into Whole Foods, either in a couple regions there, and then go global, get into kind of a best-in-class conventional in H-E-B or a Wegmans or Publix, and then once you've kind of pressure tested the concept and the brand, then approach a mass retailer like Walmart and Target. And I think that paradigm's changing. It's exciting to hear from Sarah and Laura this morning on just how they are being more flexible. And I think you're seeing that from both Target and Walmart. And they really need to be flexible to help facilitate and bring the brands along, but they also don't want to get a bad reputation. I mean, if you fail with some of these brands, it's a very highly connected community, and that word gets out that they're less than easy to work with.
All right. Talk about where things are with Target right now a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, they came out and they had their best comps in 15 years. And so I think that they are doing some really good things with the omni-channel experience. Their big initiatives are really allowing their guests to purchase and decide where to purchase on their own terms. So a lot of emphasis on click and pick up, ship from store. I think both Target and Walmart now have this very defensible strategy on being able to ship from their store locations. So Target's got 1,800 mini DCs that are shipping next day, same day to the guests, and really has taken a lot of the costs out of the distribution model. And so I was saying that to a few of the brands this morning, you can feel it when you walk through certain parts of Target. There's a lot of optimism back. I think even though they've dissolved some of their Made to Matter program, there's still this emphasis on bringing emerging brands in and curating them at the department level, and you have some really smart and savvy buyers there.
Why didn't Made to Matter work so well?
Why did it work so well?
Did it not work so well?
Well, it ran its course. It was a tremendously successful program for a number of brands like Justin's and Kind Bar for 3 years, and I think what happened was it was a difficult effort to repeat it, to continue to repeat every single year. We got to know that team very well, and I think the reason why it eventually dissolved was it was a messaging issue. When you said to the consumer or the guest, Made to Matter, consumers said, what does that mean? Is it better packaging? Is it better product? Are you taking sugar out of it? And so I think it eventually it ran its course. It ran for 3 years, was very successful for a number of brands that were able to scale and get access to resources that they may not have had access to. And so I think you'll see something like that reincarnate. You're seeing it both at Walmart and Target as well.
Across these other classes of trade, these kind of curtain raisers on new products, I mean, do they have to be through that sort of program, or is it becoming more standardized that they're going to see innovative products in the set?
Yes, so in the area of deep nutrition, that's where we especially see this kind of tribal thinking amongst consumers, where they are seeking out products that meet really specific nutritional needs, and an open-mindedness amongst retailers across the board, because these are very lucrative customers. And if you can bring them into the store for kind of a captive audience for those deep nutritional products, then you may have some loyalty to keep them. Almost all shoppers shop at multiple locations. Whole Foods is very trained within their zip codes, how do we pull in more volume from the other retailers within our sphere of influence? Deep nutrition seems to be an area that's very influential. The natural channel is, of course, still a really beautiful place to incubate deep nutrition products. If you just think about the foot traffic, 100 consumers walking through the store, there's a certain number of them that are going to be seeking collagen or a high, healthy, saturated fat, ketogenic style product. That percentage of shoppers is going to be lower that are seeking those types of products than conventional. These are basics. The omni-channel is a tremendous place for naturalizing these styles of products, because you don't have to wait for the wave of consumers to walk by, hopefully sift out those who are interested. Instead, that tribe actually comes and seeks you in an area of unlimited shelf space. So, this is all happening very much in real time. The conversation last year looks a little different than this year, But we're seeing brands that are coming from out of nowhere, you know, posting $5–10 million worth of commerce in their first 18 months, purely omni-channel, and then backfilling with a kind of a quasi both natural and conventional strategy at the same time, and being very, very successful, and a lot of receptivity. You know, stores like the, call it very core natural stores, used to kind of punish you if you started out in these other places. It was come supplicate thyself at this throne first. I won't name any names whatsoever, but we want to see your products first. And that model's really changing, where there's an openness to you know, multiple venues for product launch.
Do you think it's possible to debut in Whole Foods and Walmart simultaneously, though, particularly given the emphasis that they've always had on exclusives at Whole Foods?
It's a careful pursuit. You know, the pricing has to be very carefully attended to. Perhaps even a regional strategy so that you're not kind of overexposed. Retail's expensive. You know, you're going to be spending a lot on the free fill cases and getting that whole model set up, intensive promotional activity in year one. And, you know, if they're in a world of unlimited cash, yes, you would push out everywhere, but, you know, it's a careful pursuit.
I think there's a difference between omni-channel and sort of curated channel planning, though. And deciding, you know, you can either go everywhere at once, or you can say, my channel mix is online, and then I'm moving into certain classes of trade.
Yeah, well, I would tell you, we have a philosophy that all roads eventually lead to Bentonville, but not everybody takes necessarily the same path to get to Bentonville. Some people take a more scenic tour, and some people come via the expressway, right? So there's not one size that fits all. I think the most important thing that we see in working with the emerging brands, and if we can get with them early enough, is really as soon as you can, because eventually you're going to want to have this dialogue with Walmart. Decide as early as you possibly can what you want to look like at Walmart. What would your SKU count look like? And ideally, what do you want your retail price point to be at Walmart? Because Walmart is EDLP, and we don't apologize for being EDLP. That's what we stand for our customers. But so that you don't have sticker shock when you get there, is effectively manage your trade spend, your frequency, and your depth of discount on this journey down to Walmart, so that you're managing your ARP, because your average retail price is what we're going to benchmark against, and not your everyday shelf price. So have control of that, knowing that Walmart's going to want to be 10 to 15% below that ARP when you get there, and so effectively manage and plan for success at Walmart months, if not years, in advance. And I got to tell you, it's a great place to be when you get there and you've thought through it clearly.
Can you work on a parallel path? Or not just...
Yeah, I think you can. To your point, you can work on a parallel path, and I would say it's less a parallel path, and it's more of having a very effective channel strategy, right? I think at the core, your brand has to resonate with customers every day in every channel in which you put your brand in. What you really should be leveraging those retail tactics that each different channel may provide you is a way to drive trial and be an enhancement, but it can't be a disproportionate share of how you drive your velocity. So I think if you have a clear channel strategy that allows each retailer to do what it does best, then I think you can absolutely be in more than one place at one time.
But should that clear retailer strategy always take Walmart into consideration?
I think you have to. I think you can play high-low in some of these classes of trade, and Walmart's very sophisticated on how they look at the data, their percent beat, the ASP out in the market, and so I think Treg said it very well. I think you have to have an understanding of what each of those channels, I think, as Tracy said, the e-com gives you very quick access to the voice of the customer. You can innovate. You can certainly do different things with pack sizes. So there's a great role for that. The conventional kind of grocery network, I think, allows you to get some regional sensitivity. The There might be, based on distribution, some supply chain efficiencies there. And then as you scale into the mass setting, you really have to be ready to handle the supply chain. There are some stores, and we heard Laura say this morning, and Target's the same way. Like, there are 800 Target stores that do very well with emerging brands. It's their high health and wellness stores. But there's still another 1,000 stores you have to consider if you go chain-wide. And so I think there's this responsibility to get good guidance on making sure you can scale. I think the other thing that is implicit what Trig is saying is that you have to think about where you grow the next year. So like, how do you put something in place in 2019 that you can then annualize and then run a mature business, a comp business that following year, so that it's not just, you don't max out one year and then have to retrench, because that's really difficult story for investors, really difficult story for your retail partners when they see syndicated data going in the wrong direction.
So is the term here retailer management? I mean, is that what we should expect from our brokers, and how do we encourage that?
Velocity is still king, and if you're not testing that out and building your retail strategy around where consumers are going to pull that product off the shelf, then you don't really have a retail strategy. Spreading yourself really thin in an again, expensive manner and having products sit on shelf is a very dangerous strategy. A lot of times brands they just, get me out there, come on, get me out there. And if you don't also have that matching consumer pull strategy ready to create the velocity, then you can find yourself not getting another bite at the apple, if you will. That retailer will have felt like, gosh, I gave you a try, and you kind of sat on shelf, and maybe you have a wonderful product, but consumers haven't found you yet. Maybe it was a little ahead of its time. So making sure that any place you push into, that the pursuit is flying off the shelf, at least equal, maybe more, than trying to gain those spots on the shelf.
How often are each of you telling brands that they're not ready to push into different areas, particularly knowing how important velocity is for brand growth right now?
It's important that we have that honest conversation with them. I do like what Target's done with carving out their high health and wellness stores in a smaller percentage of stores. Even hearing Laura and Sarah this morning talk about you can launch in 10 stores at Walmart. So that's a different pace that you can go at. You can gauge the productivity, as Tracy said. And so I think you're finding retailers more open to the smaller tests. But you have to be productive. You have to be profitable for the retailer. You have to be able to meet the supply chain expectations. And so, I think there's also this expectation for brands, if they are launching in the mass channel first, that they are that they're relevant. You hear about the kind of this thin slice of these trends, and so there's some that are going to be very relevant 3 years from now. There might be some that are gone. I heard a great one of the buyers we were at the other day say, keto today is kind of a front of the pack icon. It could be a back of the pack icon, back of the package icon 3 years from now. But take advantage of that now while it's top of mind for the customer and the consumer, and then maybe in the following years it's not so relevant. So I think it's really incumbent on us to help our brands understand what the retailers' hot buttons are, what the obviously the timing and some of the resources are as well. But ultimately, it's about productivity.
How incumbent on the broker is it, though, to say, this is good now, and you're going to need to evolve it this way in the future to really achieve growth?
Well, I think one of the reasons we called ourselves Team Direct is that we're very direct with our clients in that, and it kind of fits our compensation model because we only invoice our clients on product once it goes through the register. So our whole mentality is we don't get paid unless it goes through the register. So we're going to be really direct on if there's packaging needs, pricing needs, sizing needs. Do you have enough social media to drive the brand and awareness? So we have those conversations all of the time. Because what you'll find, and you guys know, in other classes of trade, there might be more ability to get off shelf and to do deep discounting and do 10%, buy one, get one free, twofers. In Walmart, you have to win on the shelf. 93 to 95% of all of our volume at Walmart, regardless of the category, comes from the side counter. The customer has about 3 to 5 seconds to make a decision on your product. So when you're thinking about coming here and we need you to be ready, you need to have disruptive package and distinctive package that they can get in a matter of seconds that clearly communicates the benefits of your product, and hopefully that they discover it based on the awareness you have driven around your brand so that they recognize you on the shelf, and we drive trial immediately as soon as they discovered that now it's at Walmart and oh my gosh, it's at a great value. That's a wonderful combination for us.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest shifts that's happened in the brokerage profession, if you will. You know, when there were far fewer brands, your job was to get out there and sell. You know, set it up in the distributor, push it out to retail, be the connective tissue between the back door of the manufacturer and the moment a consumer picks it up. Now that there are thousands of new brands coming to market all the time, a big part of our role is curating the absolute brands, coaching, optimizing the concept, making sure it tastes great. You know, that's, as somebody who tastes about 100 brands a month, I'm surprised at how many well-funded concepts, you know, just still don't taste good. And, you know, there's a lot of variability there that's expected if you're, you know, say very sweet Reed's ginger soda versus a non-nutritive sweetener. And consumers have different expectations. So I don't mean to make it say or make it sound like everything should be hot fudge sundae, but that's still king, and our job.
It is.
It works really well at Walmart.
Taste is king.
Yeah, and our job, a big part of our role now, it all happens at the front end to make sure we're selecting the best brands that are going to turn. We're optimizing them from a packaging and product perspective, size, price, and then we're coaching them along the way. We love to see products when they are in their infancy. It's really hard when our brands come to us and they have a whole new lineup. They're just about to hit the go button on a 10,000 case run, and it's like, you really should have come to us 6 months ago, and we could have had a few things off the pass. So just from the perspective of getting to see a lot, a simple edit could have really optimized the concept.
So you brought up well-funded brands, and I think it was TJ who brought up Skinny Dip and Clio, both of which are brands that have had institutional money in. I mean, this sort of go-fast strategy with funding behind it, how important is that to an omni-channel approach?
I think picking the right equity partner is critical. I think there are a lot of options out there. Capital's relatively cheap right now, and so I think that emerging brands have the ability to go out there and canvas and understand who are the right partners. It's not just about the money; it's about the expertise. It's about filling in. Jane mentioned earlier, VMG is a great private equity group that will help plug in holes along with their executive team, and so it's really. And I also think that you're increasingly seeing. Companies hold off on taking large pieces of capital in until they can really prove their concept and feel like they can have tighter control of the development of the product. But I think it's, that once the equity is in, then there's typically some sort of stopwatch that starts and says, how long is it going to take for us to scale the brand?
Yeah, I say bootstrap to the max and, stay in that leadership role so that the clarity of your vision as a founder really is cemented into what the brand stands for before a lot of outside influence can get a hold. And you're going to want that assistance and crafting and shaping of your concept, but get it cemented and dialed in first with that founding vision.
Across all your channels of trade, what's the dream product you think your retailers want?
Collagen with CBD and anti-aging. In a protein ball. Yeah.
In a steak, right?
Yes. No, a hot fudge sundae.
That would be tasting like hot fudge sundae.
For $2.99.
Yeah. At 40 points of margin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Seriously though,
That's pretty serious.
Because, what do you think Walmart would jump on right now?
I think Walmart is just continually looking to be, as much as possible, leading edge on the trend. And I think what we find is brands that have really proven themselves and created scale that Walmart can lean into quickly and make a splash with, and it be a critical piece of business that really matters to Walmart, because we can launch this in 3,000 or 3,500 doors versus 10 or 20 doors. Those don't come along often, and the more of those that we can have, I think really makes a difference in the financials.
What about in the conventional grocery set? What's the natural brand that they're dying for?
So we get excited when there's pent-up demand and there's not enough of fill in the blank. And I'll give an example. The wall of energy bars are generally very carbohydrate heavy, very mature, a lot of similarities, and brands that are highly disruptive with novel nutritional profiles are being sought after. It's massive business, and the general nutritional profile, I mean, we only eat carbohydrates, fats, and protein. That's all any of us ever eat. And we've had this foundation of carbohydrates, and that category is a manifestation of that. So products that come in and can be truly disruptive, it's like pricking a bubble and watching the demand meet up with that new supply. And I saw that in the fall with certain bars that had become disruptive. They look like wild animals had come in and torn those boxes apart in a wall of energy bars that were all perfectly set up. Those that had saturated fat just were rifled. So that's pretty neat to see.
So you mentioned CBD, and we have a minute, 5 seconds. In all your channels of trade, are they all jumping on this? Do they all want to see products that are using CBD, or is it, just the occasional Wegmans?
I'll give you 15 seconds on what Target's doing. Target sent out an RFI, and I think they're going to tread slowly. I think they're going to watch what the market does, and they'll pick off certain more favorable marketplaces or markets around the country to test it in as soon as this fall.
And do they want to test it via food?
Well, the topicals are the least debatable right now. So I think that would be where you start, and then ingestibles at some point over the next 12 months.
And I think at Walmart, there's a high degree of interest in CBD across every category. But I think we will be slow and methodical and be driven more by the FDA decisions, especially in ingestibles.
All right. And
I'd go so far as to say everyone is interested, and those who are jumping in have a higher risk tolerance and probably don't have the challenges of being interstate and having locations in our 15 or so problem child states right now. So there's sort of a separation of who can tolerate the risk and who's answering to boards and has concern in that area. But I believe there will come a day. This is too big to fail. There's a genuine value for humankind in the 104 cannabinoids in the hemp plant. And so it's here to stay, and retail will come along.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we have to get along. So thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Good job.
Jeff.
Good stuff. Tracy?
Hey.
Good job.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Hey.
I think that ending on slow and methodical versus fast and jumping in is a great lead-in for our next speaker, because just as change can be scary, so too is risk. But the two really go hand in hand, and I'm not sure which is more intimidating. But sometimes when there's so much change around you and everything is moving so quickly, a company that has been maybe more slow and methodical has no choice but to take a risk. And that's the position Jamie Athos, the CEO and president of Tofurky, found himself in with his family-owned plant-based food brand. Although Tofurky was successful, the world had changed since its founding 40 years ago, and the brand either needed to take a risk with its branding, positioning, messaging, and point of view, or risk getting left behind. Here to share how he took on this journey, and as a result, created a company that was stronger and better, please welcome Jeni.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. So I'm going to say a few words about when to risk it. Risk is something that we all think about as business leaders all the time. But in particular, I've been thinking a lot about this issue since I had a conversation with a friend in the industry. I won't name names. He's a great guy with a great company, a relatively new one. And one of the things that first drew me to his company was sort of the irreverent tone that he struck with social media. And we kind of know the currency of social media tends to be clapbacks and trolls and whatnot. And I always liked the way, in a non-mean-spirited way, he would clap back. And he was talking, we were sitting having lunch, and he was reflecting on how he felt a little inhibited about that. And the reason behind it was very understandable. His company has grown. He now has significant revenues and profit. He has more employees to be concerned about. He has contractual obligations and whatnot. So basically, the stakes had raised for him. Oh, there we go. I should tell you a little bit about Tofurky, first of all. So my stepfather, Seth Tibbett, he started the company in 1980. Back then, it was very much bootstrap. We've heard about bootstrapping. You cannot bootstrap more than Seth did. He started out really solving his own problem. He identified a consumer problem because he was a young hippie and a brand new vegetarian, and he didn't know how to meet his own nutritional needs. And as a vegan myself, you hear constantly, how do you get your protein? How do you get your protein? His mother had the same concern for him. He found a way to get his protein by making a traditional Indonesian soy food called tempeh. He liked it, he made it for his friends, they liked it, and they asked for more. Aha, an opportunity. So Seth got into the tempeh business. And his bootstrapping went all the way to how he put a roof over his head. He found it was actually a little bit cheaper, instead of paying rent on an apartment or a house, to rent 3 trees and build a tree house. And he lived in that instead. So that was his solution. And that's how he was able to get by in a very kind of hand-to-mouth business for the first 15 years. In 1995, things changed. He found another consumer problem, and that problem was, if you have a vegan coming over to your holiday celebration and you don't know what to feed them, he provided a solution to that, Tofurky. The product looked a little bit differently back then, but it was more or less the same. It's a tofu and gluten roast. It tastes and slices and chews just like turkey does, and thus the Tofurky brand was born. And we've grown a lot since then. I can relate to my friend in the sense that we have a lot more to lose now than we did when we first started. Along the same lines, 20 years ago, the natural foods industry was really all about idealism. It was all about founder vision, and the consumers shared that vision. And they were few and far between, though, unfortunately. So it kind of limited the opportunities. Fast forward to now, and we're reading about billion-dollar IPOs. We're reading about hundreds of millions of dollars invested in companies every day, and acquisitions along those lines as well. And I guess to draw a parallel to my friend's company, really this whole industry, the stakes have raised for the whole industry at the same time. And yet, I'm here to tell you that we have a duty to do more than just succeed on financial terms. Because for all its downsides, potential downsides, capitalism has the potential to do great good, but it has to be wielded in the correct way to do that. So we've done obvious things to communicate our values to our consumers. We're organized as a social purpose corporation. We are a certified B Corp. For those of you who don't know, B Corp certification is an independent kind of third-party audit that scores you against essentially fair trade practices across your entire business. But beyond how we do our business, we're also a brand, and that brand has the potential to help further the mission of our company as well. But the path to brand impact is inherently risky. I won't tell you otherwise. You have to risk standing for something, not everything. And we'd all like to feel like we could sell to everybody, but the reality is we can't. Our message, our mission is not going to resonate with everybody. You have to also risk vulnerability, because ultimately I think honesty engenders loyalty. And if you do those things, you have an opportunity to deploy your brand in a way to create real direct action out in the world and leave a legacy of social purpose, ultimately. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, you have to find your true north. What do you believe in? What does your brand believe in? Those are not going to be the same answers, probably. I'm almost embarrassed to tell you that it was very, very recently in our company's 40-year history that we finally went through the process, put the time in, to formally articulate what our mission and values were. And I'm going to excuse ourselves a little bit because we're a family-owned company and a small company for much of our history. Seth, my stepfather, started it. I'm the CEO now. My mother was the CFO for about 13 years. My brother worked in the QA department. My ex-wife, she is our charitable giving coordinator. And Uncle Bob is still a shareholder and board member. And so I guess we had that luxury of, instead of having to articulate and formalize our values, we kind of explored those things over the dinner table. And, but you know, as we have grown, we now have 195 employees. We have many millions of customers now too, and they need to understand what we're about. It's not just implicit to them, and so we had to go through that process of self-discovery and to find our own true north. So ultimately that's a process of finding what is your reason for being. And that shouldn't just be a story that you tell. It shouldn't just be marketing. It should also be a story that you can actually live by. It has to be real. And it has to take the things that you believe in and express them in a tangible form. If it's too abstract, then there's nothing that you can actually do with that. It has to be actionable, ultimately. And the good news is, if you do that, if you create a tangible sort of a mission, it doesn't just inform your marketing. It doesn't just inform your messaging. It ultimately becomes a touchstone that you can use to inform decision-making throughout your entire organization. Like we say here, from R&D to accounting. And I really do use that mission all the time. In spite of the fact that I felt like I really understood what we were about, I think articulating it has actually taught me even better what our actual true mission is. Okay, and so our mission, our vision is ultimately a future where the plant-based meat aisle, or the plant-based products aisle dwarfs the plain old meat aisle. And I think we're being generous here to give them a whole aisle, but we'll leave that for now. I mean, this is version 1.0. And also where animals are friends, not ingredients. Notice that this is a little bit different. This is not just a solution to a consumer problem or a consumer opportunity. This is more action-oriented. These statements seek to solve social problems, environmental problems, moral problems. They're bold aspirations. And then, so that kind of evolves into what is our narrative. So Tofurky is not just a food company. We're an engine for global change. We all understand how important the decisions that we make as consumers, and particularly our food choices, are in terms of the impact that we have on the world and sustainability issues. And we want everyone to see the wisdom of a plant-based diet. And we do that by not making arguments, intellectual arguments, or making emotional appeals. We do it by appealing to people's taste buds. We make tasty food. Ultimately, that's the way that we find common cause with people who might have different political ideas than we do. And I think that's one of the things that Seth essentially baked into the brand. Whether it was consciously or not, he's an includer. He draws people in. He doesn't exclude people. And he's also a whimsical guy, thus the name Tofurky. But you need to ask yourself, is your narrative trying to be all things to all people? Because that's impossible. Don't pretend like your mission is going to resonate with everybody. You need to find those things that make you excited to go to work. And other people will respond to that enthusiasm and join you. Nobody wants to follow you down a road to nowhere. You have to articulate a direction. So find your people. You need to understand your people. You need to find those people to join you on that path, on that road to somewhere. And the great news is that we have a new, well, not a new generation, they're much younger than I am, but the millennial generation. We talk about them a lot. They're a powerful demographic in terms of consumer, they're a powerful consumer demographic, 25% of the population representing $200 billion in buying power. And the great thing about them is they're a conscientious consumer generation. They want brands that are authentic and unapologetic about what they stand for. You still have to have good products. People are not going to suffer for very long to do good. So you have to give them a good brand experience and give them good products also. And they want to hear the real you. So I submit that authentic brands are the ones that compel people. They're the ones that compel me. An example that I really admire is Patagonia. They're not vegan. I wish they'd make some different choices, but I do admire their honesty. When they discovered that their down was being produced in inhumane conditions, they were forthright about that. They were honest about that. They took ownership of the problem, and they committed themselves to solving that problem. I really also admired that they told us not to buy their products. That's a real act of faith. Because most of us who are Patagonia fans, we care about the environment. And really the best thing you could do is not buy that next puffy jacket. It'll probably last a few more seasons. You can probably get a few more seasons out of it. But they trust that when you do finally retire that jacket, you're going to come back to Patagonia because they stand for something beyond just selling you jackets. All right, so we've talked a little bit about talking the talk. But walking the walk of your narrative needs to mean more than just selling your products. I think it's easy for those of us, especially in the plant-based food world, to rest on the fact that just selling our products is an inherent good. The animal agriculture industry is, the status quo industry is really horrible for the planet. So just by displacing those products, we're doing good already, right? Well, I think that there's more that we can do than that. One example that we've done at Tofurky is to take on a really wrong-headed and counterproductive law that was passed in Missouri. So the Missouri legislature, in a clear act of trying to protect the animal ag industry there, passed a really ambiguously worded law. And it seems to, and again, it's ambiguous, I'm not sure what it really accomplishes, but it seems to possibly foreclose the use of really common terms that we would all use to describe our products, things like burgers. And that's ridiculous. We're a society who's been drinking soy milk without confusion for decades and eating veggie burgers without confusion for decades. The only thing that's really changed is that they're seeing that the potential for their animal agriculture stronghold to be displaced is sort of happening right now. And I'm actually pretty happy to report that we're kind of in the final stages of finalizing a settlement with the Attorney General's office there. And one of the final sticking points, which I think we've gotten over, was that we insisted that this settlement doesn't just apply to Tofurky, it applies to all third-party beneficiaries as well. We did this because we want to protect our industry because we think it's a solution to global problems. And so it wasn't good enough to just protect ourselves and relieve ourselves of legal liability. It was important that we did that for our entire industry as well. So when you have this alignment with your consumers, you have political capital also. So whether it's like Patagonia has done, they're challenging the rollback of the Bears Ears Monument in Utah, or like Tofurky taking on the legislature in Missouri, I submit that that's what you should do. And ultimately, it's going to benefit your brand in the long run. I don't think you should do it just for that, but I think that that will be the natural outcome of it. And find your voice also. Make sure that those issues, if you have a brand that aligns with social issues or environmental issues, any sorts of issues like that, lend your brand, the voice of your brand, to the chorus. Some of the other examples of things that we've done are to speak up on immigration issues. Our small town where we make our products is Hood River, Oregon, and it's very much an agricultural community. It's orchards and it's vineyards, and there's a significant immigrant population there, and a lot of the people who make Tofurky are immigrants as well, and we thought it was important to give a voice to issues around immigration. We also lent our voice to the Me Too movement. We found that some of our nonprofit partners didn't have common sense protections in place to prevent issues like sexual harassment and whatnot, and so we insisted on that. And finally, we used our voice and pressed our case in court, for example, in Missouri. So ask yourself, can you back up your actions with true intent, and does the outcome of those actions, does it benefit more than just you? And if you really care about issues, I think that you have to be willing to come back to them and hammer those issues over and over and over again. And I would like to say that Missouri is the only state that's passed laws like I just mentioned, but unfortunately, a dozen or so more have already passed those. And I guess we haven't filed any legal action yet, but those other states are going to have Tofurky to reckon with as well. And thank you.
Chat about risk. I'm about as good with change as I am with risk, so maybe I'll learn some more things. So it was interesting you showed, the little cartoons as the screen was sort of going through the presentation. That was a pretty big risk for you guys. That was actually a total brand refresh. I don't know if you guys have noticed that all the packaging kind of features whimsical hot dogs and sandwiches now, and talks to you with little thought bubbles. Talk me through that one specific change that you made and the risk you took there.
Yeah, really that is one of the things that came out of this process of defining our mission and vision and values was we had to understand who our consumers were better. I think one might assume that our consumers are vegans, and the reality is that's not true. That's a small subset of our consumer base. The majority are omnivores. And I think one of the nice things about the brand Tofurky is that it's inviting. I think that brand came about in a time when you still called natural foods health foods to some degree, and they were a very serious business and very dry. And I think that that rebranding effort was an attempt to not only maintain relevance and catch the eye. There are all these products out there, and just having a vivid color palette and whatnot is really important, but also to make them approachable also. For some people, this is a really big step for them, trying their first plant-based products, and we wanted to make that as simple as possible and as attractive as possible.
Now, as you're trying to expand your accessibility of your products, you also go and sue the state of Missouri, which, kind of almost go against each other, right? Like a little bit it looks like, oh, it's this angry plant-based food company. How did you sort of explain to all these new consumers you had what you were doing and why you were doing it?
Yeah, I wish it was more accurately reported in the media because, we're in a kind of a quick turn kind of news cycle world. But really, the goal was just fairness. And, I think we have a very good case. I almost hesitated to settle it because I think we have really good First Amendment grounds. We have lots of consumer protection law in place already that prevents people from making fraudulent claims, and nobody was making fraudulent claims. The people that buy our products do so because they're proactively seeking them out ultimately, and we wouldn't gain any friends or any customers by trying to deceive them. I think the whole spirit of that law was misplaced. It's alleging something that doesn't exist, and I think part of standing for something is just standing up for justice and what's right ultimately. And I think that everybody can relate to that. I think it's not risky if you're doing the right thing ultimately. And if you're doing the right thing and there's a negative consequence to it, well, so be it. At least you did the right thing.
And, you mentioned some of your family tree that works for the company. I think a lot of founders, when they're starting their company, wind up working with close friends or family or taking capital from them. Is it, how hard is it to convince your family to take risks versus, the other people in the company? And how do you go about that?
Well, I think the good news is that my family is so aligned on these issues. It hasn't felt risky. I think that we've been really surprised to find ourselves in the place that we're in right now. We never expected the world to change around us, which is really what happened. We've been making Tofurky for a long time and having a nice business doing so, but it wasn't until this revolution, this tipping point was reached, that things really changed for us. And so I don't think that we ever were aspiring to be massively financially successful. None of us are very materialistic or acquisitive or anything like that. And so it doesn't feel as risky to us because the things that we might lose are things that don't matter as much to us as being a force for good in the world. I think this is not just Seth's legacy, but it's our whole family's legacy ultimately. We want to be able to reflect on what we've done with our lives and feel proud about that ultimately. You know, I've got a couple of young kids, and I want to hand them a world that is better than it was when we found it. And I think that's worth a lot. That's worth a lot more than profits are.
You mentioned the category changing around you. Do you feel like that forced your hand in taking some of these risks? Do you wish you had done some of these things earlier?
Absolutely. You know, we made lots of decisions a while back that were predicated on, you know, an expectation of growth that was relatively modest. We've been growing for a long time and growing double digits for a long time. But the potential for us to double in size was suddenly presented to us, and nobody anticipated that. It sort of came out of nowhere. I think like a lot of social phenomena, they move along incrementally until they reach some sort of tipping point, and then they explode. And we're seeing that explosion right now.
Are there things you would have done sooner if you could have, or in particular, like branding or messaging or figuring out your consumer?
Yeah, I think not as much in that realm. I think that the regrets that I have are around capacity. So when this demand sprung out of nowhere, we found that the demand for our products well exceeded our ability to fulfill those orders. So if I were to do it again, when we made our investment in building a new plant and buying new equipment, we probably would have doubled or tripled the capacity of those equipment purchases. So that at the very least. I will say that our brand, it was probably easy not to put a lot of effort into refreshing our brand periodically. We had the benefit of having this quirky name, and it became a convenient sort of joke for, it was on like the Colbert Report and things like that, and it was a lot of free earned media for us. And so it felt like that marketing upside was always there, and we didn't have to be so deliberate with other aspects of marketing. But you know, I think not everybody has heard of Tofurky, and not everybody has seen the Colbert Report ultimately. And so really the communication that we have with our consumers, ultimately a lot of it happens on the shelf.
And, you know, you, speaking of capital, recently took investment capital. Has that changed how you approach risk? And in and of itself, that seems like somewhat of a risky choice for the business, considering you never had done that in 40 years.
Yeah, it was risky, and we were very cautious about how we went about that and who we were willing to take money from, because ultimately, when you have financial partners like that, they have a say in how you conduct your business. And we had to find the right people, and we found a person ultimately. It was, you know, we received the money by way of the fund that he is ultimately behind, but he's a person who's trying to change the world also. He's an impact investor, but I think that even that's not giving him enough credit, because I think even impact investors expect to make money out of their investments, and he's a guy who's giving his money away to nonprofits all the time. And it wasn't an act of charity, you know, we're paying interest and whatnot on those funds, but I think understanding that we had true alignment with him was absolutely necessary for us to feel comfortable taking his money and getting into this business relationship with him.
And let's go a little deeper on the lawsuit with the state. You know, how have you gone about conveying to your company, as well as your consumers, what you're doing and why you're doing it?
That's a great question. You know, honestly, we haven't had a lot of internal messaging about it. So our consumers, though, I think that so there were, I think, 1 billion impressions about that lawsuit. And so ultimately, the media became the way that we got to communicate you know, what we were about with our consumers. We're also very involved in a trade group, the Plant-Based Foods Association, and that's another avenue for us to advocate for our industry and for issues like this, ultimately.
And so we did get a question in asking if you'll be, you know, suing other states or pursuing legal action in other states, or was this like enough risk and now you're kind of like, okay, I'll let somebody else carry the torch?
I would be happy if somebody else would carry the torch, but what we're finding is that not everybody in our space is in it for the same reasons that we are. And that's great. Again, they are doing good by selling their products. I think that they're helping us fulfill our mission also. But it's important that we don't let laws like this go unchallenged. I think they really could have a massive and a chilling effect on our industry. So the Missouri law in particular, it was a criminal statute, and it had, for every instance of a violation, up to a year in jail and $1,000 as a penalty. If you sell tens of thousands of products in Missouri, that adds up really quickly. That's tens of millions of dollars and 10,000 years in prison,
I was going to say,
for
you're going to
example.
spend a long time in jail.
I don't have that many good years left. Yeah. So, you know, I think that was the intended effect also. It's sort of a chilling, it's like that sort of Damocles hanging over your head. It's not that they're saying you can't sell plant-based products, but you have to maybe use really confusing nomenclature to do so. Would people buy a veggie burger if it was called a protein puck or something like that? I think that sounds good to you.
Apparently, yes. I think we learned if you add collagen and like CBD to it from our last panel, they will.
Yeah. So, and to answer your other question, yeah, we're looking at these other states really carefully, and we're thankful to have. I mean, I've always really admired the ACLU, and the ACLU Missouri was our representation in that case. And the ACLU, the national organization, is really interested in these issues too. They see the proliferation of laws like this, and they see how these really are stifling free speech, because like I said, there are lots of protections on commercial speech already, or inhibitions about commercial speech, but nobody is fraudulently using these terms. Nobody is trying to deceive people. Ultimately, products like ours tend to cost a little bit more too. You know, it's not. I think that a lot of these consumer protection laws, as applied to food products, they came about because people were being deceptive in a way that was economically motivated. They were trying to sell cheaper, lower quality things using the nomenclature of the higher quality things. It was ultimately, it was harming consumers. And nobody in the plant-based space is harming consumers. They're making people healthier ultimately by selling their products to them. And it's often at a premium too. So it's not like a consumer is being deceived into that. They're having to probably go to a different part of the store, frankly, in the grocery environment that we're in right now, and pay a little bit of a premium for those products too.
It almost seems like it was a risk if you didn't take action.
I feel like it was. I mean, we've seen in other, like in Europe and whatnot, some of these laws have passed. Even in Canada, some of the required sort of nomenclature that they use are really unfavorable terms, things like simulated. Simulated is not a very palatable term. It's not tasty ultimately, and it's required on your packages. Again, I don't think that helps you sell more of your product. That doesn't make these things that are really tasty and good for you. They don't sound as appealing to consumers because of language like that ultimately.
So looking forward, what other kind of risky behaviors can we expect to see from Tofurky?
Well, it's such an explosion of new products out there that I think what you're going to see is a big proliferation of new Tofurky products. So one of the ways that we're stepping out of our comfort zone is we've always manufactured our own products. And that's a model that tends to take time, but we had the benefit of 40 years, so we could do that. But that's not the world that we're in right now. I think that finding good partners and trusting them to be our manufacturing partners ultimately, and to make products for our consumers that we're so loyal to, that's going to be the revolution that you see with Tofurky going forward.
Well, we're excited to keep watching that revolution, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Carol.
All right, guys, so we're going to go to lunch right now and come back at 1:45. For our pitch slam. You don't want to miss that. And for those of you tuning in live, again, you've got the Livestream lounge to keep watching experts straight from the event. Thank you. This industry is so popular, it's launching thousands of new products every year. How many of these can really be on shelf?
The size of the brick and mortar world relative to natural and organic, which is this year going to top about 133 billion.
We were doing, over $130 million in sales with 24 people.
Disrupt and be disrupted. There's somebody behind you always.
The naturally mainstream customer, and they make up about 2/3 of our natural foods shoppers. And they buy a mix of conventional products and natural products.
We are starting to see a shift in the consumers' demand for products with an absence of negatives to products with a presence of positives.
Consumers are always at the heart of what we do.
So if we can't really solve a problem for the consumer, we feel like we shouldn't be jumping into that space.
The community is what's driving our innovation, our flywheels.
We're trying to be that modern day convenience store and be that new 7-Eleven.
Big food knows they have to change.
I think the strategics are looking for businesses that have soul, and the soul starts with why you start it.
You know your consumer base best, and you know what you want to project out into the world and own it. Love it, embrace it, celebrate whatever it is your product is. This industry is so popular, it's launching thousands of new products every year. How many of these can really be on shelf?
The size of the brick and mortar world relative to natural and organic, which is this year going to top about 133 billion.
We were doing, over $130 million in sales with 24 people.
Disrupt and be disrupted. There's somebody behind you always.
The naturally mainstream customer, and they make up about 2/3 of our natural foods shoppers. And they buy a mix of conventional products and natural products.
We are starting to see a shift in the consumers' demand for products with an absence of negatives to products with a presence of positives.
Consumers are always at the heart of what we do.
So if we can't really solve a problem for the consumer, we feel like we shouldn't be jumping into that space.
The community is what's driving our innovation, our flywheels.
We're trying to be that modern day convenience store and be that new 7-Eleven.
Big food knows they have to change.
I think the strategics are looking for businesses that have soul, and the soul starts with why you start it.
you know your consumer base best, you know, and you know what you want to project out into the world and own it. Love it, you know, embrace it, celebrate whatever it is your product is.
We're back at the Livestream studio here at NOSH Live Summer 2019 in New York City, and I am about to chat with Matt Perry, CEO and founder of the Good Crisp company. Pardon me. Welcome to the Livestream studio.
Thank you very much.
How are you?
I'm very well.
Good to see you. Thanks for joining us
Pleasure.
here. As they can probably tell already, you're from Australia.
Yes, g'day.
So I want to talk a little bit about your background, just working in ABC sales and marketing, transitioning out of retail and launching your own brand.
Yeah. So, a background in Australia, ABC was a importer product. We used to buy people's brands and bring, or we still do, and bring them into Australia and sell them. So we had a lot of experience launching and, importing and doing the logistics for other people's brands and launching that, but we wanted to do our own one, and so that was been the change that we've done now under the Good Crisp company, and obviously moving here to the US.
Yeah, that's awesome. And where are you based in the US?
So very fortunate. We've landed in Boulder in Colorado, which is really a hub of natural food, and obviously a beautiful place in America as well.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a bit about the rebranding since the Australian launch versus the US launch?
Yeah, so we realised fairly early on that our branding, and we launched under a brand that we used in Australia and had relevance and traction in Australia, but didn't really have that, didn't have that same history, didn't have that same relevance to the market here. So we pretty quickly realised that we needed to rebrand, and so that's where we came up with the Good Crisp company. Mm-hmm. And for us, really, the three pillars that made us know this is the right brand for us is really everything we do is built on good taste, which is the first thing, good ingredients, good product, and then feeling good about yourself, which is sort of the key of our brand. So it really resonated with us. It spoke about everything that separated us from other canister chips out there, and so we just knew it was the right thing. And the sales and the consumer response have shown us that, thankfully, we were right in that decision.
Great. Well, can you talk a bit about navigating the US market versus the Australian market?
Yeah, it has been. It's been different, definitely. I mean, there are similarities. I mean, they're all grocery stores. We all sell, CPG products to consumers, but probably more so the how to market, how to go to market has been different, and brokers and UNFI and then direct and things like that. I mean, even from a population size as well. I mean, Australia's with the same physical landmass size as the US, but we've got 25 million people as opposed to, hundreds of millions of people. So there's a lot more complexity and layers involved, but really, fundamentally, they're the same. We've got a product that we think consumers are looking for, and we use grocery and online to do that, and then it's our job to let people know where we are and to pick it up on shelf. So, yeah, it's been a lot of learning, and we've been lucky to surround ourselves with advisors and people that have been in the industry that can help us and to show us some of those differences and make sure we don't make too many mistakes. But fundamentally, it's very similar to what we do in Australia.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Now, it's been on shelves here for about 2 years,
Yep.
right? Carol, actually, NOSH's editor, wrote about your investment that was received in January from Circle Up Growth Partners. So I was wondering how they sort of helped you navigate the market here.
Yes, Circle Up have been really a great partner for us, and we deal day-to-day with Pat, based here in New York, and he's been great as well and really fits into our culture, and we get along really well with him. So that was one of the most important things is, they helped us financially and with money. That's really important. We launched nationally with Walmart, and we are with Whole Foods and things, so we need some investment in capital to help with those things, and they provided that. But more so, we wanted someone that could partner and work with us, and Circle Up have been able to do that. They've got a great network that they've plugged us into. They have a great community there, and that's probably been the biggest help that we've experienced as well. Certainly for me, coming to a new country, not having those contacts, not having some that industry knowledge there, they've been able to really quickly plug me into that, and to be able to provide some of those contacts and some of the context as well for what we're doing. So they've been a great partner for us.
That's great. How many stores are you guys in now?
So now we are in around 6,000 stores, and that continues to grow. We're quite comfortable where we are with store levels, and we've been really fortunate to get that level of distribution, as I say, within 2 years. So really for us, our focus is on, okay, how do we really capitalise on the stores that we do have? How do we drive our velocities? How do we get off locations? How do we get off shelf? How do we do those things to really make it work with the great distribution that we've been able to get?
Can you tell us a little bit about navigating natural markets versus mass retailers and what that's looked like so far?
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're, I think, one of the few brands who's been fortunate enough that we launched nationally with Walmart and nationally at Whole Foods in the same year. So we really are playing in both those areas. And so it's something we're conscious of and how we handle that. But we think, once again, the consumer need that we're meeting is the same. So we provide a canister chip that's all taste, no guilt, is what we say. So people that are looking for a better for you option, that they're happy to give it to their kids or their celiacs or gluten-free so they can't eat it themselves, can take advantage of our product. Now, we want to be in stores, whether they shop in Walmart, whether they shop in Whole Foods or all the co-ops and the natural stores that we're in, that we're really happy to be in. Yes, the stores are different, but the consumer need is still the same. We don't have a different product for different stores or anything like that. So for us, really, the challenge is it's more on the B2B side of things. Yeah, margins are different, route to stores are different, those sort of things like that. But we have the experience to do that. We have the people there that can help us do it. So then it's, okay, well, how do we then talk to those consumers? How do we reach those consumers? And for us, that's been probably the biggest challenge for us is, we're great at talking to the Whole Foods customer and we're plugged into that, but how do we find the Walmart customer that wants the things that we want for our product? And so we're starting to really move in that area and find those consumers, but for me, that's probably the big change between the two.
Mm-hmm. What do you feel like about the product packaging stands out in a retailer like Walmart, for example?
Yeah, for us, so we're in the gluten-free, better-for-you set of the Walmart store, which we're really happy to be in. And we're probably one of the few snack products there. To be honest, it's a whole range, baking mixes and other things like that. So it's actually good for us. I mean, we're certainly the only canister chip there for us. So I think our physical form and our cylinder, that really helps us to stand out, whether that's Walmart or whether that's other stores. So for us, the form of our product is a really big part of what we do. Yes, we're going to actually refresh our packaging and try and help it to pop and stand out a bit more on shelf as well, because that's a really big thing. It doesn't matter where you are, you're 3-4 SKUs on a whole aisle there of product, and so consumers sort of spend a couple of seconds there looking. So it is really important to stand out, and we're working on that, but we think we're grateful that our packaging the form and physically is different to a lot of what's out there in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And then is there anything, I know this is your first NOSH Live,
yeah.
Welcome officially.
Thank you.
Is there anything that you've gleaned from any of the panels relating to that, or anything else that's helped you so far?
I've actually really enjoyed it, so thank you for having us. It's definitely something keen to keep coming back to. I think a lot of the topics that have been covered have really been relevant. It's been a whole range of things, either whether it's Jay Miller talking about sort of growth and things for a CEO and those sort of things, which are really important, to then sort of the Walmart and the retailers and that, and listening from their perspective about what they're interested in and how we grow with them. So there's been a lot of really practical things. And then even yesterday, I think with Pinterest and other things like that, how do we tap into those consumers that I talked about? As I say, that's a really big thing that we're focusing on. So how do we find those consumers, not in an annoying way, but we've got a product that we think they're looking for, that's helpful to them. So how do we connect with them in that regards?
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, we're happy to have you and hope to have you back again. Thank you so much for stopping by the Livestream studio to join us. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you out on the floor.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.
Next up, we have Jeremy Halpern. He's co-chair of Food and Beverage Group, Nutter, McLennan, and Fish LLP. Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for joining us. So you spoke with us at the boot camp on Monday about investments a bit, and I saw that you got hounded immediately after the presentation ended. I'm curious what types of people have approached you, what types of questions they've been asking you here at NOSH Live.
Sure. A lot of people are very interested in structuring early stage investment. So they're trying to think about, they might have friends and family who have already indicated some interest, or they might have an early high net worth individual who's indicated that they'd be interested in investing. They're trying to understand equity or convertible debt or safes, how to think about those things, what are the risks and rewards of doing it, and how to make sure that you're doing something today that positions you for long-term growth rather than doing something today that inhibits long-term growth.
Yeah, definitely. And what are some of the biggest mistakes you feel like emerging brands make with investments in the beginning?
Sure, so it probably covers a range of things. Some of it is tactical in the way that they approach investors. This morning I got an email in my inbox where someone just data dumped on me and then said, would you be interested in investing, right? That's a terrible way to approach an investor. You should approach them in the way they've asked to be contacted, if that's through a venture firm, through those associates, or through a portal platform like a Gust or Proceeder. If it's an angel group, through the submission process. If it's in a networking environment, think about this is a person, it's a human being. They're not just money walking on legs. And so engage them, talk to them like a person, see if they've got some interest, see if there's any kind of fit and relationship and similar values and what you're trying to go after. And then I would say ask for permission to submit something. Would you be interested? May I, would it be okay if I sent you a deck? Would you be interested if I could send you some information? Those are common courtesies, but it matters a lot in the way that somebody receives it. Also, investments that come in through trusted resources. When I, as a lawyer, send to one of my investor friends, they elevate it to the top of the deck. That's true of the accountants or the bankers or fellow investors. If you just send things live to people, maybe it'll get looked at, but it might get looked at next year for all you know. It's at the bottom of the deck. Second, it's all about, I think, trying to find alignment between what you want and what they want, and being respectful that they have their goals and their objectives as investors, either personally or on behalf of third parties for whom they're fiduciaries. And for you, the entrepreneur, thinking about, okay, I want that money accelerates growth, but I need to do a deal that works for me and works for them. And so how do I create a conversation that starts about alignment, ends about alignment, structure is about alignment, everything is about going in the same direction together.
And I think you mentioned that cultural fit is a really important thing to consider. How does one define cultural fit in this situation?
Sure, so a couple things are easy to kind of determine off the top, which is if they're a fund and they're running third-party money, they have typically very constrained time obligations. They're usually 10-year funds. They're investing in years 1 to 4. That means they need to liquidate the position within somewhere between 9 to 6 years, depending upon where you fall in the cycle. So they are putting money in with the expectation of capital appreciation and growth, and then an exit. That might be different from an individual investor who says, hey, I'm fine to invest in a 20-year income-producing business that never gets sold. So make sure you understand who the investor is, what are their objectives, is it a venture style or an income style play? And then culture, I think a lot of that is around how do you think about control of the business? Who's going to be making decisions? How collaborative is it? Does the investor want to be hands-off, silent partner? Or does the investor want to be deep in the decision making? And then you as the entrepreneur have to be comfortable with the idea that it's now a collaboration, it's now it's a triumvirate, as it were, as opposed to a dictatorship where they're used to just making decisions. Now you have to confer with people, you have to stop, you have to get input, you have to get alignment. Those things matter a lot. I think values matter. There are people who invest in certain kinds of brands with certain kinds of social impact or certain kinds of entrepreneurs, whether that's women-led or minority-led businesses. I work with one investor who I have such respect for because he tries and finds projects that are veteran-led, because he's very passionate about that and trying to find ways to inject money into that community. And so those are good things. Those help create alignment. But also, what's the impact on the other side? Are you interested in projects as an investor that are all about high growth, or are you interested about double bottom line, where changing the health profile, the nutrition profile, maybe health benefits for a category of people, maybe accessibility of food, maybe there's a give back in terms of the generation of the supply chain that led into that product. So those are good things to ask and to make sure you're on the same page about.
And as you mentioned, it can be difficult for the entrepreneur to relinquish control, especially in the beginning when you're so used to deciding a lot of things on your own. Can you maybe give a piece of advice or two on how they might maintain their cool in that situation?
Absolutely. There's a great book someone mentioned yesterday by a friend of mine, Noam Wasserman at Harvard Business School, who talked about the founder's dilemma. And are you oriented towards wealth creation or oriented towards control? And an important thing as an entrepreneur is to be just honest with yourself. Are you the kind of person who likes to be the decision maker and you don't like to consult people? If that's true, you often have to find investors who are willing to be more silent partners, more like the way friends and family typically invest. If you're someone and it's all about wealth creation, then that should be a reminder to you all the time that when you are going to make a decision and you're seeking input, you're not just seeking input for form's sake. You're doing it because hopefully you've identified investors who are bringing real value to the table. They're bringing experience, knowledge, contacts, domain expertise. They've also have pattern recognition. They've tried sometimes that same thing 3 or 4 times. They know how it plays out. So they can add a tremendous amount into the conversation. And so at that point, it's not about control. It's back to what is the objective? We're trying to get to the best answer under the circumstances. So they have a lot to offer.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is obviously a lot of information to take in as a new entrepreneur. Is there a resource or two other than the book that you mentioned that maybe entrepreneurs can go to find out more about all of this if they're just curious?
Yeah, there's some great resources out there, and everything from things at Y Combinator to the Capital Network, which is out of Boston, that does a lot of resource-rich material around the fundraising process. Bob Stringer, who's a great investor in the early stage food and beverage space, wrote a book called Culture.com about building culture internally, and that extends out to how you think about investors. Also, peer-to-peer networking and having a share group of fellow entrepreneurs to talk through some of these issues with, super important resource. Also, again, the bankers, the lawyers, the accountants, again, we see thousands of deals. We see how these things play out. So we're often a great resource. Someone's always willing to have a lunch with you. So you don't need to be on the clock to say, hey, would you get a cup of coffee? And I just want to talk through an issue and get some feedback to help think through some of these, evolution kinds of issues.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's great advice. I think sometimes maybe there's some overthinking involved rather than just reaching out in a more casual way.
And this is an amazing community. People are so willing to just have that cup of coffee and offer some support.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, is there anything else that stood out to you here at NOSH Live the last couple days?
Yeah, as ever, I'm always impressed when I come here about the quality of the content and also the quality of the participants, the presenters and the attendees, that people are very motivated about finding what's next and